I did my mystery book over The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. So my hook is I forget everything in between footsteps. And basically what this specific quote is going back to saying, it's Aidan Bishop who is the protagonist. It's his first words of the entire book. And although it sounds pretty boring with just what it is, it only increases with the book going on, if that makes sense, in a way that this one sentence will make sense once the plot is revealed and like why Aidan is forgetting everything. So the summary starts out with Aidan Bishop, who's the protagonist. He's a young man. We don't know his exact age, but he seems to be like a young man. He wakes up one morning in a very gloomy, dark, foresty area in a huge mansion called Blackheath. And it's like very obvious that this mansion used to be more popular, more lived in, but now it's more of just rubble and dust. And he's very, very confused. And that's like why he says, I forget everything in between footsteps, because he can't remember anything. He can't remember his name. He can't remember who he is. He can't remember why he's there. He doesn't even know where he is. So he's very confused because he feels like he was just born, even though he's a grown man. Continuing off of that, Aidan is approached by a mysterious man who's in a trench coat and a plague mask, like the plague mask that has the bird beak on it. And this man basically comes up to him and says, I don't know you, or I'm sorry, you don't know me, but I know you, and these are the rules of the game. And he starts listing off these rules, and basically the rules consist of you have 8 days to figure out a murder mystery, and if you do not figure out this murder mystery in 8 days, the loop will reset from day 1. You will have to live through all 8 days again, and then you will have to try to guess again from there. And basically until Aidan gets the correct answer of who the murderer is, he has to keep living that life on repeat of entering a new host body every single day. And that also takes us back to the hook, because he's in a new host body every day, so he has no recollection of anything before, and he's literally no clue who he is, what he's doing. But that just takes us back to the hook. But anyways, so this man, yes, he comes to Aidan. He says all these things about all the rules of the game. He also mentions that Aidan is not the only one playing the game, that there are other people. And if another person guesses who the murderer is first, then there will be a punishment. We aren't quite sure what the punishment is, but Aidan just knows that it's not only a crime scene, but it's also a competition to see who can figure everything out first. And basically he starts in somebody's body named Sebastian Bell. Sebastian Bell, he's a doctor, and he's a very uptight man. He isn't rude, but he's just very distant and kind of awkward a little bit. He's not great in this murder scene because he doesn't gather a ton of information because he's more worried about himself. And also Aidan isn't really like understanding what's going on at this point, so he can't really bring himself to do a ton just because he's still trying to figure out like what's even going on. So Sebastian Bell was definitely not a big help. But the next day he was the butler of the Hardcastle family's mansion, and this was a bit more helpful for him because the butler obviously knew the way around. He knew the ins and outs. He knew some of the secrets behind this mansion. So that definitely helped, but the butler wasn't, he wasn't physically well suited off, so like Aidan didn't really get any of those physical attributes, but that's okay because he got them with other people. But the butler definitely helps him kind of start to figure out what's going on, start to figure out this castle, the people, the premises, all that stuff. And then the next day, Aiden wakes up in Donald Davy's body. Donald is a policeman. He's I'd say pretty cold and reserved to himself. And as smart as he is and stuff, he's not the most physically able. But since he's a policeman, he definitely has more rights and ways to get to people and to talk to people, just because it's literally his job to investigate and figure out crime scenes. Like, that's what he does for a living, so it's not suspicious whenever he's getting leads from different people and investigating different people at the Hardcastle's mansion. So that was definitely helpful for Aiden, because he got to see, like, who knew what, where people were at this time, that time, and he got to do it through the eyes of a policeman, so he didn't look suspicious at all. The next day, he wakes up in the body of Edward Dance. Edward's a banker. He's pretty closed off, but the good thing about him being a banker is he can kind of pick apart who seems a little bit more suspicious than others, but this wasn't the biggest help to Aiden, so he kind of just went past that day. Not a big deal, nothing really stood out to this day to Aiden. That will lead him closer to the mystery of Evelyn Hardcastle's death. But then the next day, Aiden wakes up in Jonathan Derby's body. Jonathan is a wealthy man. Other than that, doesn't really have anything that makes him stand out, except for the fact that one day while he was observing around, he caught on to some people having a secret meeting talking about basically the deeper and more intimate secrets of the Hardcastle family. And this is where we learned that Thomas Hardcastle, which is Evelyn's brother, was killed many years ago in what seemed to be a funny and harmless prank, but it actually turned into his death and murder. And ever since then, the Hardcastle family has been very cold towards each other, especially Evelyn's mother. She was very stern and cruel to Evelyn after that death. So yeah, that definitely gave Aiden a ton of help, because he kind of got to see that the family wasn't as perfect as it may have seemed from the outside, so that he could start considering maybe the family members as potential murderers. But anyways, the next day he wakes up in Clark Rashton's body. Clark is strong. He can chase people. He knows who to look for, who not to look for. But whenever he's chasing one man that he finds or deems suspicious, he gets in an altercation with that man. But it ends up being nothing, because the man had nothing to do with the murder, and basically that was just a free fight for Clark. Next is Jim, who's Clark's brother, and Jim is a lawyer, so it's kind of his job to do crime and to dissect crime and decipher things like that. So Jim helps Aiden for more of the mental aspect of this case rather than physical like Clark's. Since Clark was physically strong, he was very good for that portion, but now it's Jim's turn, and it was really good for Aiden to have Clark and Jim back to back, because he was kind of fresh off of both of their memories, so he knew what to look for, what not to look for. He had the pieces fresh in his brain from both people. And then lastly, he enters Lord Cecil Ravencourt's body, and this is just a mathematician, and basically Lord Ravencourt does lots of problem-solving equations to kind of figure out who was where at what specific times, and this crosses a lot of names off of Aiden's bucket list, and also brings a lot more names to the top and to attention. And Aiden is left with the answers of who committed this crime, but I won't say that just in case anybody wants to read this. But Aiden does figure out after being in these 8 host bodies, because each host gives him a different piece of information that leads him ultimately to his goal, which was finding out who committed the death of Evelyn Hardcastle. My personal connection to this book was, I remember freshman year I read a book in my English class called And Then There Were None, and it was kind of a similar plot. These people were stranded on an island. They had to figure out who a murderer was. It wasn't the exact same, but it definitely is the same in a way that there's a select group of people and somebody is the murderer. So they both have different endings, I'll say, in that way, but I won't give it away too much. But that's really like what I mainly compared to this book to. And obviously I compared it to like crime scene shows like Criminal Minds and things like that, just because they're crime scenes, they're murder investigations, but this one felt very closely connected. And that's basically it for that, and why I chose those to mash together. And I feel like that's pretty explanatory, but I think it's really just because they're select groups in a select location with a select victim, which all ties together at the end. My academic response, I would say the level of difficulty definitely depends on how passionate you are to read books like this. I don't think if you don't have an attention span for murder mystery books, I think it's going to be a lot more difficult, because it's going to be a lot more difficult to remember what each host saw, what each host heard, what they did. But for people like me who really enjoy reading murder mysteries, it's definitely not as difficult, because you're so on the edge of your seat, you're so ready to figure out more, that it seems more like a joy to read it than a chore. And I feel like that sometimes has a lot to do with the difficulty level. And something I really liked about the way the author wrote this is just how with each character he gave them all like truly their own personality, their own ways, their own plot. Like he really didn't mix and match a ton, which I liked. He was very cautious and very creative on how he wanted each character's storyline to fall out. And I recommend this book to people who enjoy reading mysteries, who enjoy having a nail biter, and who enjoy like solving things for themselves. Because I know I definitely, along the whole way of this book, was guessing who the murderer was, and I wasn't right with any of my guesses, but that's okay. That's the fun part of it. So I think if you're like eager to follow along with the author and make your own opinions and form your own answers, then this book is definitely for you. And that's my presentation. Thank you.